a mighty deity feared by all the villagers, was brought down by prayers of one pastor. What an interesting story. In the heart of a small African village, nestled between lush green hills and winding rivers, there lived a community bound together by tradition and fear. For generations, they had worshipped a mighty deity known as Kokumo, a god feared for its power to bring both prosperity and destruction. The villagers believed that Kokumo resided deep within the forest, where ancient trees whispered secrets to the wind, and the sound of drums echoed through the night. The villagers would offer sacrifices to Kokumo, hoping to appease its wrath and gain its favor. They believed that without Kokumo's blessings, their crops would wither, their livestock would fall ill, and their families would suffer. The fear of Kokumo was palpable, and the villagers lived in a constant state of reverence and dread. One day, a young pastor named John arrived in the village. He was driven by a fierce determination to spread the word of his God and bring the villagers out of what he saw as darkness. Pastor John was convinced that the villagers' worship of Kokumo was misguided and that their fear was unfounded. He believed that his God was the one true God, and that he alone had the power to save the villagers from the clutches of the evil deity. Pastor John began to preach to the villagers, telling them of the love and forgiveness of his God. He spoke of the miracles and wonders that his God had performed, and of the salvation that awaited those who believed. At first, the villagers were skeptical, but as Pastor John continued to preach, they began to feel a sense of hope and curiosity. As the villagers listened to Pastor John's words, they started to question their beliefs about Kokumo. They began to wonder if their fear and reverence were misplaced. Some started to attend Pastor John's church, drawn by his conviction and the sense of community that it offered. But Kokumo, sensing the shift in the villagers' loyalty, grew angry. The villagers noticed changes in the forest, the trees began to wither, and the rivers ran dry. The villagers were terrified, believing that Kokumo's wrath was upon them. Pastor John, undeterred, saw this as an opportunity to demonstrate the power of his God. He organized a prayer meeting, calling upon the villagers to renounce Kokumo and turn to his God. The villagers, desperate for relief, joined him in prayer, and as they did, a strange and wonderful thing happened. The skies opened, and a gentle rain began to fall, nourishing the parched earth and reviving the withered crops. The villagers saw this as a sign of God's power and began to turn away from Kokumo in droves. But Kokumo would not be so easily defeated. The deity unleashed its full fury upon the village, causing destruction and chaos. The villagers were torn between their fear of Kokumo and their newfound faith in Pastor John's God. In a final, desperate bid to prove the power of his God, Pastor John challenged Kokumo to a test of strength. He marched into the heart of the forest, carrying a cross, and confronted the deity. The villagers watched in awe as Pastor John prayed, calling upon his God to cast out Kokumo and free the villagers from its grasp. As Pastor John prayed, a brilliant light filled the forest, and the earth shook. Kokumo's power began to wane, and the villagers felt a sense of liberation wash over them. The deity's influence began to fade, and the villagers knew that they were free. In the aftermath, the villagers turned to Christianity en masse, grateful for the deliverance they had experienced. They built a new church, and Pastor John became a revered figure in the community. The villagers still tell the story of Kokumo's downfall, but now it serves as a reminder of the power of faith and the deliverance that comes from embracing the true God. The moral of this story is multifaceted. It speaks to the power of faith and the idea that true deliverance comes from embracing the right beliefs. It also highlights the struggle between tradition and change, as the villagers were forced to choose between their old ways and the new teachings of Pastor John. Ultimately, the story teaches us that sometimes, it takes courage and conviction to challenge the status quo and embrace a new path.